John Fredericks Radio Network, good to have you back. Scotty Weldon with us now. I put him in our email as a communications director for Scott Taylor. That was a mistake. That was old, and we apologize for that. He is an independent consultant right now, and I wanted to have him on today. We've only got 10 minutes, Scott, so we're short on time with FEMA. But what I really wanted to talk to you about is a conversation we had last week in D.C. where you told me in buying Facebook advertising for your political clients that you had noticed a real change in the way they're manipulating their algorithms so that you really can't get your message through. Can you elaborate on that to our audience, Scott?
Sure, John. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you. Wanted to, one of the things that we noticed that, and I would say it was probably 2017, maybe early 2018, Facebook changed their algorithms on some of the way that when you were making postings and some of the way when you were pushing out content, it was different. And we even noticed a difference with Scott Taylor when we were on between our official page, our government page, and the unofficial page, which had probably 20 or 30 times as many people on it. So when we were looking at kind of the reach that we were getting versus, the fact that we'd have to dump money into it to actually push and boost on the unofficial side, and then versus the reach we were getting on the official side, and this is kind of one of the big issues that I think people are talking about. It's not just Facebook. There are several other tech companies out there that kind of have this, and you've been hearing about it more and more, and especially I think the administration's working on an EO right now kind of to redirect the FCC to pay attention to some things. I know that's in the works, but kind of just I think a baseline of the understanding of kind of how this worked. And it was probably in response to all of the hearings that Facebook had on the Hill around that time. So I think they wanted to shift up how their messaging was changing. Mm-hmm. But there's no doubt that we saw an impact on the reach that we were seeing, the impact that we were having, the amount of money we have to put in on the unofficial side to get the amount of reach that we normally would have gotten with a singular post.
So what is Facebook's objective here? Is it to limit conservative voices being heard? Is it to influence the election? With these algorithm changes they have made, what's their objective?
Well, it's hard to kind of imbue motive on somebody, but all we know is the impact that it has. So when we're looking back and saying, oh, well, and you look at some of the other tech companies and some of the things that kind of have come out over the last year or two on some of the bias. And, you have to say that there has to be a little bit of concern that there's something going on in terms of bias towards conservatives. Heck, John, I pulled up your Twitter page the other day. I tried to search for you, and I couldn't even find you on there. It looked like you've been shadow banned.
Right, I've been shadow banned.
I think the concept that there's something untoward going on, it needs to be looked at. I think that it's kind of hard not to say that there's something happening because there shouldn't be any difference for anybody on any voice. And honestly, although we want to restrict as much of the extremist speech as we can, having opposing viewpoints is what's driven this country. So we don't want to do that. So I think it's a good thing that we're paying attention to it a little bit more.
Well, what's amazing? Democrats and liberals never get shadow banned. Anti-Trump people never get shadow banned. Any of those 20 Democratic candidates, they never get banned or shadow banned. The only people who get banned from Twitter or shadow banned are Trump supporters. I mean, it's just kind of amazing coincidence, don't you think? Like, when was the last time you heard a super left-wing progressive saying, oh, my God, Twitter banned me, right? Conservatives, you hear about it every single day, and especially shadow banning now has become an epidemic for them. And it's when they banned me from Twitter, we made a big stink about it. I went to the media. I was going to do a press conference. And finally, all of a sudden, I was not banned, right? Got no information one way or the other. They just didn't want to deal with the pressure. Shadow banning is something else. I mean, that's when people just can't find you. And I kind of gave up on it. I'm like, you know what? If you want to shadow ban me, whatever. I mean, it's so ridiculous what they're doing. It's so obvious. Facebook is doing the same things. I mean, they're manipulating the searches. Google is doing the same thing. They change those searches. So if you put a certain name in and it's Trump-oriented, you get the first negative 10 things that come up. You get the opposite in, you get the first 50 positive things. I mean, all these things are being manipulated in order to influence people's opinions outcomes, what the elections are, and it all goes one way, left.
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple. I mean, I don't know if there was a hearing on the Hill in the Senate a couple weeks ago with a research psychologist named Robert Epstein. He gave kind of shocking information that kind of, I think people, even if it's just placement or your search results or how something is presented to you, that it has an impact not only psychologically but has an impact on your behavior. So, kind of looking into some of the things that are happening on that side, and I think that's a very interesting hearing that people want to take a look at. Take a look at that. I mean, I also think there's a couple other great pieces out there right now. A few months ago, a guy named Carl Zinsmeister wrote a piece about the calculating philanthropy of Silicon Valley, and kind of touches on kind of the mindset of some of the tech gurus out in that area, and I like this is one of my favorite quotes. Steve Forbes referred to it as nerd fascism. So I think I'm going to steal that for a little bit, but I think it underlies the bigger question of why can't people get their voice heard, especially if it's not an extremist view, if it's not something, it's just an opposing viewpoint. I think that's a dangerous road to go down.
So what do we do, Scott Weldon? I mean, here you are, a consultant. You're in D.C. You've identified this. You've seen it for yourself. You buy advertising on digital media for your clients. You've seen a drop in the effectiveness since they've changed the algorithm on Facebook. You've seen me get shadow banned and many others on Twitter. So what do you do?
I think this begs the question of why the administration is looking at an EO on this exact issue. I mean, they had one of Google's engineers come out last week and say a few comments, and the question is, at what point do your First Amendment rights intersect with companies' ideas on how to use their platform? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of issues here because it goes into regulation is something Republicans don't like. And these organizations are very big supporters of Democrats, even though some of them are pretty intent on trying to break them up. When you look at people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have actually mentioned talking about breaking up these companies, but there's huge amounts of donors from that industry that go towards these companies as well. So kind of an interesting kind of approach. I just don't know what's going to happen. I think that's why Trump is kind of looking at it the way he is. But you also don't want to be too heavy-handed because, like I said, we as conservative Republicans, we don't like regulation. So I think there needs to be some sort of, in my mind, the companies need to be a little bit more transparent with their algorithms, how things are operating, what the impact may or could be. Because, and I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to impute motive on any one organization, but at some point you've got to say it's impacting one side more than it is the other. So how do we not do that if our goal is to have free and equal access for everybody to voice their opinions, as long as it's not hateful or insightful?
Well, the main thing is to bring attention to it because it's obvious what they're doing. They've been getting away with it now for a year and a half, and hopefully going forward, the president, look, he's going to have to do something because they are determined to influence the election. When we went through the Russia hoax, everybody said Russia. I mean, the real issue is Facebook. I mean, they're the ones that are doing it. Russia spent what, 150,000 on ads, and what Facebook is doing with their algorithms is worth hundreds of millions of earned advertising because of the way they're manipulating this. Hundreds of millions, and yet nobody says a word. So hopefully the president can get under this, and all of us can keep an eye on it because it's really very disturbing. You got three tech companies now, Google, Facebook, and Twitter, that basically control what, Scott? 85-90% of the entire social media atmosphere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be
Absolutely.
Well over 85%.
And that's where people go to,
That's
and
where
this
we
is
all
the whole
go.
revolution, and about 10 or so years ago, where candidates, this is an opportunity for them to go get their voice heard, to be more relevant, to not have to abide by the traditional, media rules. And it was very successful for a long time, but you hope that political influence doesn't kind of work its way in there. So My hope is that people will things will level out. People, sunlight's always the best disinfectant, so hopefully people kind of understand the process and what the companies are doing a little bit better, so they have more faith in them.
All right, Scott Weldon, we're out of time. Thanks for being with us.